All right, I'm going to jump right in here to our Module 1 Core and Shell O2 project. So this is our Week 2 project for ARC 220. As I noted in the previous video, I'm not going to go over the instructions. I will be using them, of course, throughout this video, but I'm not going to go over each individual thing. So I've got my instructions open, and I've got my final deliverable open. And what we're going to be doing in this assignment is creating most of the openings, doorways, windows, curtain wall, that glazed curtain wall, I should say, so sort of the windows of this building. So I've opened my file from my previous assignment that hopefully should be done at this point. And the first thing that we're going to do, I'll show you in the final deliverable, there's a sheet here where we have to add an elevation so that we can start to detail this thing out. So this is an elevation on the patio that we can't see the bottom of because of a wall on our exterior elevation. So I'm going to go to my second floor plan, and that elevation is looking at this wall here. So we have to create a new elevation. To do that, we go to the View ribbon. So the View tab brings up the View ribbon. We go to the Create panel, and right there is this elevation. Creates an elevation view. And these things are pretty smart. You can actually create an exterior elevation or even an interior elevation. And as you move your cursor around, the closest wall you're hovering near will be the wall that it points to. And that will be the elevation that it creates when you click that button. So I want this wall right here. So I'm going to place it somewhere out in the middle here. There we go. And I don't know if you noticed that, but over here now we have another elevation. It's just called Elevation 1A. So I click on that. Looks like this. I'm going to rename this real quick. So I'm going to call it East Patio Elevation. Now, anytime I create a view, whether it's an elevation, a section, or anything, the first thing I want to do is change my scale. So I believe these are 1/8 inch equals a foot. That's correct. It is 1/8 inch equals a foot. I want my detail level to be coarse. So all that's correct. A lot of times I have to change my scale on that. What's not correct is we need to move this thing out a little bit because it'll trim itself to the inside wall there. I believe this crop box is where I want it to be. Yeah, it was. So I'm going to just undo that. It goes right to there. I do want to be at the actually, I want this to be at the second floor, so I'm going to pull this crop box up. Now, unfortunately, these crop boxes do not snap to the floors. It looks like it did. Well, maybe it did this time. Maybe they fixed that glitch. Looks like they fixed it, so it does snap to the floors. I'm going to pull this down to just over there. Let's see here. And all I want, again, is second floor and roof, so this I can hide. And I'm not even going to be doing anything in this elevation. I'm just setting this up for later when I start to use it. Pull those out, and there's that elevation. That's ready to go. Now I can move on to my next step. So looking at our first floor plan, our ground floor plan, looking at our first floor plan, you can see that we have to create a bunch of glazed curtain wall. The first thing that we need to do to accomplish that is to create an opening in our existing walls, because as you know, we just have solid walls right now. So the first thing I want to do is create some openings. And you can see that this wraps around this entire piece here until it hits this fin wall, and then it wraps around to the next fin wall, and then it wraps around to our break in our wall. And hold on, before I go anywhere else, let's go up to our second floor, and you can see the same thing. It wraps around here to the fin wall, keeps going around to this fin wall, and then wraps around to that patio elevation that we had just created. And the way that we're going to do this is by elevation. That's why I want to show all this. On the second floor, we've got some punched windows. So this is more of a curtain wall out here. This is more of a punched window vocabulary. I don't know, you might call these more like ribbon windows out here. I'm going to start out on my north elevation. So I'm going to select that view, and I'm going to go to I'm going to look at my final deliverable, north elevation, and you can see that those bands of windows that we saw in plan at the first floor, they start at 1'4" above the first floor and they go up 12 feet. Then we have a 6'5" 3/8" spandrel, and then above that we have a 10-foot opening. So what we need to do is cut our wall out so that we have essentially no wall there, so we can then place our curtain wall elements. So to do that, we are going to use that split tool that we used last week. So that's in the modify tools, the split tool, this button right here, split element, and we can create some horizontal splits on this piece of wall right here. Now the problem with the split tool on elevation is it's very easy to not click in the right spot. It does seem, honestly, I have to say, it looks like it's working better in 2023 than any other version I've used. But what you want to do is really look at this. So when I highlight this mass, you can see that just when I move my cursor a little bit left or right, it's selecting different things. And you can also see a light horizontal blue line, which is where that's going to create the split. If I move my cursor down here, it's going to create a vertical split. So I'm going to move my cursor over here. And again, I'm not going to worry about where these are. I'm just going to create them. I'm going to split that there, somewhere here, somewhere above the second floor, and then somewhere below the roof line. So I've split these pieces up, so now you can see that they're individual pieces of wall, and I can simply click on them and press the delete key and delete those. Now I've done that for the north elevation. I'm going to go to my east elevation, and here you can see where I've cut that portion out of that perpendicular wall. So I want to continue that around. Again, I'm not worried about where all these are. I can move these all around later. So I'm just going to go in and kind of do the groundwork for these openings. Now this one does get confused. So it's kind of hard. You can see that that's actually the wall beyond. So that's not this wall that I want. And you can see that this is doing a vertical cut. So how can we fix that? Well, we know we want to split this wall here up. So what we're going to do, I'm going to hit escape. I select that wall. I come down to my glasses. This is my temporary hide isolate. And I'm going to click isolate element. And what that's going to do, it's going to hide everything but that element. So now that I have that isolated, it's still going to be tricky because of the prompts aren't very clear. If you look at where my cursor is, I'm not even really on the wall. I'm to the left of the wall, but you can see that I'm getting a horizontal cut. So I'm just going to place two. See, I'm still having trouble getting that, even with this isolated. For some reason, this wall has always given me trouble. So I'm going to click down there, and then I'm just going to do two more up here. And now I can delete those sections out. They're definitely not in the right spot. Now I can come back to my temporary hide isolate button and hit reset, and now I have that. Now again, these are not in the right spot. I'm going to jump to my west elevation, and the first thing I want to do here is I want to split this wall vertically at the fin wall. So again, I'm going to use my split tool, and I'm going to try to do this. Let's see if I can do it without hiding. Now that's a vertical. I'm just going to do it at the bottom. It's not going to be aligned with the fin wall, but now it's a separate wall. You can see that's a wall and this is a wall. I'm going to come back and do that to the other side of that wall. Now those are not aligned with the fin wall, but that's easy enough. I can hit the AL shortcut, align, and then I can find that split and align that there. So now my wall aligns there. Same thing, I'm going to find the fin wall. It's hard to see, it's hard to figure this out a little bit with these bricks, but there we go. We have this wall and this wall with another wall in between behind that fin wall. Now we can go use the split tool on this horizontal section. So I'm going to select this wall, isolate the category, oops, not the category, isolate the element, and then split this. There we go. For some reason, you just have to be outside of the actual wall to split it horizontally with my little X-Acto tool. Again, hitting escape and then just deleting these pieces out. I can reset. Looks like I didn't quite get that one. I'm not sure what's going on there. We'll fix that later. So now this wall here, I have to do the same thing. And then my south wall, again, I have to do that between the two fin walls. So once I have all those openings, I'm going to come back. I'm not going to do them all on screen. Okay, so I've split all my walls all the way around to the south elevation. And as you can see, it's a mess. So what I'm going to do is go to my north elevation, and now I'm going to start setting up my dimensions. So you've seen me do this before where I place geometry, or in this case edit the geometry, and then I use dimensions to drive that geometry later. So what I'm going to do is place a dimension from the first floor to the top of that wall, to the bottom of this wall, to the top of that wall, so on and so forth. Now, I might not actually be able to drive that with this. Yeah, see, it's not highlighting and it's not giving me that. So, the other way that we can do this, we know that this is 1'4" above the first floor. We can select this wall and we can do the base constraint first floor -8. The top constraint, however, we're going to say first floor with the top offset of 1'4". So now the top of wall is in the right spot. That's 12 feet. So 12 plus 1'4" is 13'4". So the bottom of this wall is 13'4" above the finished floor. So we can select this wall and say that its base constraint is first floor and it's 13 feet 4, and then the top of this other wall is 6'5" 3/8 above that. So 6'5" 3/8. What I can do here is I know that the bottom of this wall is 13'4", so I can use my little calculator tool where I'm saying, okay, the top of this wall, let's make that first floor, but let's make the top offset 13'4". Say top is first floor, and instead of doing 13'4", I'm going to say equals 13 feet 4 plus 6'5" 3/8 of an inch. So I'm using this text box as a calculator. I'm going to hit enter, and now the top of that is at 6'5" 3/8. Now that's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to figure out what this dimension is above the second floor. I actually think it's 2'8". Now that it's in place, we could double check that with the dimension. It is in fact 2'8". So another way that you could do this, and probably a better way, because any wall above the second floor I would probably reference to the second floor. So now I could say the top constraint of this wall is the second floor with a 2'8" offset. So this is a great example of how in Revit sometimes you can get the desired outcome, but the settings aren't exactly what you would want them to be. So, I could get this coming up from the first floor, or the top of this wall would be referencing the first floor, but that's kind of a silly way because this wall really exists on the second floor. So we want to show it above the second floor. So by figuring it out from the first floor, we've figured out the dimension, then we can go back in and change the settings. This here is going to be 2'8" plus 10, so that's 12'8" above the second floor. So we can say, oops, the bottom is from the second floor and it's 12'8". Doing some quick math there, that gives us 10 feet there. And then this is just going to be the remaining 5'6" 5/8 that is shown on our final deliverable. So now we can go back to the east elevation here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply use my alignment tool. I'm going to align to that wall. Now remember, when you're using the alignment tool, you're clicking on the thing that is in place first, and then clicking the thing that needs to be moved to that place. The other thing that you can do is once you align, you get this little lock button. Again, why not create a relationship between these two walls so that if I move one, they all move together? Because if you look at this design, I'm always going to want these ribbon windows to wrap around all at the same height. So why not lock those so that, if I change this design later, or if I make a mistake and maybe this opening isn't 10 feet and I have to change it later, well, why not make it so all openings change with one command? So I'm going to align these quickly, locking the icon after every alignment. I could do these from this side, but I'm going to jump over the west elevation and do the same thing real quick. So align, lock, click, click, lock, and just go around aligning all of these window openings, or these openings in the walls. Oops, missed that one. And locking them to each other. So I'm parameterizing that relationship between, that I'm basically telling Revit all of these walls should always be at the same height. So if I move one, all the rest are going to move. So let's go to my south elevation, which I still seem to have isolated. I'm going to turn off that temporary hide isolate. And this one's a little hard to tell what's going on because I can't see this wall over here. So I might actually go back to my west elevation, and here I can see those walls, so I can do that from this side. Oops, that didn't seem to work. Lock that. So I'm going to jump. The one thing I didn't do yet was create the patio breaks. So let's do that real quick. Go to our east patio elevation. Now this one is not going to have one at the bottom. It's just broken right here, and then the whole thing is glass. So we'll use the split tool. Again, I'm just going to get a horizontal split. That was not a horizontal split. Let's see if I can do it from the other side. Okay, let's try this again. We'll isolate. Grab our split tool. So that isolate really helps us make these splits without editing the wrong wall. So we're going to isolate pretty much every time we do that. Going to delete the bottom of that, and then align the top, or sorry, the bottom of this section of wall to that one and lock it while I'm at it. So that's our patio elevation. We're going to infill this all with curtain wall later on. Before we create our curtain wall, we're just going to keep going around preparing our openings for the curtain wall. So for this north elevation, and actually we have some on this east elevation over here, we have some punched windows. Now we could split this up, and then we could split it up horizontally and then vertically, but for the punched windows, there's 3 right here. So what I'm going to do is go to the architecture ribbon, and we have this wall opening button, which is great for creating an opening in a wall. This wall opening works very well with this punch window vocabulary. The ribbon windows, these strip windows, that split tool works well, but for these punch windows, this window opening, or sorry, wall opening works much better. So we're going to click that. And the way that this works, you select the wall, and this is, of course, I'm drawing this in elevation, and then you basically just click 2 points, and there's my opening. Now, what I'm going to do with this opening, they're hard to select, so you may have to tab into it until just the window opening is highlighted and click. Now, you'll notice that the top and bottom offset, again, is coming from the first floor, and the top constraint is parapet framing high. But because, again, this is a second floor window, we're going to do the base constraint from the second floor, and we know that that is 2'8" from our ribbon windows over here. So that'll align the bottom. And we know that this is 12 feet 8 from the second floor for the top. So I'm going to say the top constraint is the second floor as well, but the top offset is 12'8". And now I have that window. Now the width of this window is 3'4". So in elevation, I can simply click that temporary dimension and make it 3'4". Now that I have that window, now it's not in place again, I'll worry about that later, but I'm going to select that opening. So again, you may have to tab, see how if I just move my cursor slightly, I get just the window. And I can simply hold Control and drag, and now I can also make sure that I drag in a straight line so that this is at the same height. Select this next one, hold Control, and drag over, and there's our third window. Now this third window is 6'8" wide, so again I can select that opening and I can change that here to 6'8". I found the easiest way to change these widths is in elevation. To change them in plan, it's kind of weird, but I found that that's the easiest way to do that. So now let's go to the east elevation. There's a punched window here, so again we're going to create a wall opening, click on the wall, drag that, select the opening, change this to second floor, our base and top constraint to second floor, and we're going to change our base constraint to 2'8". You kind of have to do these one by one or else it'll throw an error at you. So second floor, let's do the top constraint first, 12'8", base constraint, second floor, 2'8" offset. Okay, so there's our window. Let's check our plan. That window is again 3'4" wide, so I can change temporary dimension there, 3'4". There's that window. Now I can go into my second floor plan and add a series of dimensions. And notice again, I'm creating one long dimension string. Pull these out. They should snap to a comfortable space. Computer's running a little slow, so it's not snapping. Now I can simply come in here and get these dimensions set. So I can select this opening. I may have to tab into it. There we go. Oops, I missed it. And I can change this to 2'8". What do I have? 4'8" and then 16 between the next two. So this window, 4'8", and then the next window. And just like all my dimensions, I'm always going to the next one so that I don't chase my tail. 16 feet, and those are placed properly. I'll get this one dimensioned and I'll come back after that. Okay, so now that I have all those dimensions there, you'll notice on the final deliverable that these have this MO designation. That stands for masonry opening. So we need to add that here. So in Revit, to add text to a dimension, so all I have to do is come in, and if I double click on the 3'4", this dimension text box will open. So what I want us to do in here is, you can see these text fields. We have an above, a below, a prefix, and a suffix. So you can see the value there, which is 3'4". I want the 3'4" to have an MO below the dimension line. So in below, I'm just going to type MO, all caps, hit OK, and that puts that MO in there. So now I can do that for this other 3'4", and then my next window, the 6'8", I'm going to double click MO, and then finally this one over here, double click and MO. And as always, I like to check out my 3D view and see that now I've got some punch windows. They do appear to be all aligned up with my ribbon windows. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is start placing my doors. So I'm going to go to my first floor plan, and I'm going to start with my exterior doors. I have 2 doors that go into these mechanical closets, and then I have an exterior door on this wall, an egress door. I need to load those doors from Vanco Hall. So if you simply open these files, so they're called Seco Legion. These are family files I've downloaded right off of a manufacturer's website for hollow metal doors. So I'm going to open this, download it. I'm going to open these files. If you get this dialog saying upgrade model, you obviously have to do that in order to open the model. That's fine. It can't be reversed, but because we're going to be putting these in a 2023 model, we're going to have to upgrade them anyway. So there's 2 different doors, a single door and a double door. Once you open them, I like to just say load into project and close. And because I only have one project open, it's not going to ask me. Well, actually, it will ask me because I have multiple family files. So I'm going to load this into my Revit file. Then I'm going to go back to my other door and load and close, load into project and close on this one as well. So now those doors are in this file. So it automatically loads the last one. So I'm in the double door. So 72 by 84, I believe that is correct for this door here. This double door into this electrical or fire control closet, whatever this thing is. Let's go back to our final deliverable and check our instructions, make sure our door is the right type. So the mechanical closet double door is a 72 by 84. I believe that's what I just placed, 72 by 84. That is correct. Now I'm going to switch to the single door, and you'll notice that I actually have 2 different types in here that I've created for you. This one, the one that doesn't say interior, is the exterior. So I'm going to grab that one, place that here. Again, I'm not really paying attention to placement, exact placement, or even orientation for all that matter, because I can always change that after the fact. Let's go back to our final deliverable. That door actually does swing that way, and this one swings that way. I got lucky. You can place your dimensions for these. Now, again, because these are in a masonry opening, you want to make sure that you're selecting the actual masonry opening, not, the edge of the frame, not the middle of the frame, but the actual masonry opening for these dimensions. And that way I can get these set up. So this is 24 feet. Select that, find your dimension, not the temporary dimension, and now that door is in the right spot. Same thing, these doors are masonry openings, so you double click the dimension value, type MO in the below box. I won't go over dimensioning these, but get those in the proper place. Then what I'm going to do is go back to architecture, door, select my interior. Now the one thing I want to do here is there are instance properties on here for the alignment of the frame. So I want my alignment to be centered. So align the door frame. Basically, it's centering the door frame on the wall. It doesn't look like that though. Let's double check that. What do we have here? I don't know how I can select multiples. That's weird. Well, choose only one and choose Align Center, and you can see that it moved that to the center there. Now that one gets flipped out this way. Just double check. And using the flip icon, I can change its orientation, its swing. Just those. So now I've got all my doors in. The next thing I'm going to jump onto is filling in those punched curtain walls. So I'm going to go to that north elevation. Actually, I'm going to jump to my second floor, and I'm going to fill these openings that I've created with curtain wall. So curtain wall is a wall, so I'm going to go to the wall tool, and I'm going to select my type, which is curtain wall 1. And I'm going to check my constraints. My base constraint is second floor. However, my base offset is the bottom of this window opening, which, as we said, was 2'8". So we're going to change that to 2'8" above the second floor. It's going to go up to the second floor with, again, a 12'8" offset. So the same exact top and bottom offsets and constraints as the opening. And now I can simply come in here, and I'm going to place it centered on the wall. But I don't actually want it in the center. I want it 2 inches towards the exterior. So I'm going to use my offset button here and do 2-inch offset, and I'm going to click the center line, or midpoint I should say, of that opening to midpoint of that opening, and place that curtain wall. Now it's creating a chain, which I don't want, so I'm going to turn that off, hit escape, and now I'm going to go back to the draw tool. My 2-inch offset is still there. I'm going to place that and place that. Now the other thing that's weird about these curtain walls is you'll notice that when I drew it with a 2-inch offset from the center line, and this sort of like solid and dashed line actually represents the center of my curtain wall. For whatever reason, the default curtain wall in the template has this. So to fix that, what I need to do is actually select the panel. So to do that, so again, the curtain wall is this dashed element. The actual glazing or the glass in this curtain wall is this panel. So to do that, I'm going to press the tab key until it highlights the panel and select the panel. Now I'm going to edit the panel type, and you'll see that it has this offset. I want to set that offset to 0 so that the center line of my curtain wall is aligned with the center line of my panel. And now you see that when I hover over this and select it, those are collinear. And you can see, again, because that was a type parameter of the panel, all of my curtain wall is in the proper location. Now if I go to a 3D view, I can now see that I have glazing or curtain wall in those openings. The next thing that we need to do is create the frame, or in this case, Revit calls these mullions, which are, whether it's the frame or a dividing light down or a dividing mullion down the middle, it refers to them all as mullions. So I'm going to go to my north elevation, and for now I'm going to turn on consistent colors so I can actually see where I have glazing and where I don't have it yet. And now I need to add a frame. So these curtain wall buttons up here, curtain grid and curtain mullion, are used to then further detail our curtain wall. So right now we just have a big expanse of glass, and for these we need to create frames. So we're going to click the mullion button, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to edit this rectangular mullion, this 2.5 by 5, and we're going to make it 2 inches by 4.5. So we're going to edit type. Now the way that these work is the thickness is 1 dimension, so our thickness is actually 4 inches, but the width is based upon a center line. So we're going to change this width, because we want it to be 2 inches, to 1 inch to either side. Now one thing I didn't do was I didn't change the name, so I'm going to rename this to 2 inch by 4 inch, sorry, 4.5 inch rectangular. Oops, I have all caps. Rectangular. Hit OK, fix this so it's 4.5, hit OK. And now what we can do with that 2 by 4.5 mullion type is, it's kind of hard to see on my screen right now, but as I select the edges of this curtain wall, it gives me a little dashed highlight, and I can simply click on all of the edges of that window to create a frame. Now the other thing that you can do, if you look at the draw tools up here, you can say all grid lines. Now we don't actually have grid lines, but we have outside lines. So if we click on that button and click on that window, it does it all in one click. So that can save you time if you just want to place mullions of the type that you have loaded on all the grids. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start tackling these ribbon windows. So first thing I need to do is place the curtain wall. So I'm going to start on the first floor. I'm going to go back to my architecture tab, my wall button. I'm going to pull up my curtain wall because I've already edited the panel. When I place this, it's automatically going to be centered on my line, my reference line. I'm going to change my base offset to 1'4" and my top constraint to first floor, and what was that? I believe that was 13'4" because it was a 12-foot window with a 1'4" base, so that's 13'4". And now I can simply, well, now I'm going to put chain back on, and I'm going to go from the center line of that point to the center line of this wall. You may have to grab an inference, draw that over to the center line of this wall, and if you don't get it perfect at the first step, don't worry too much about it. We can always move it later. Now you can actually see that for some reason, I see what's happening here. This wall here, which is behind the fin wall, it's automatically joining the edge of this wall. So what we need to do, you can see that because I have designated the end to be here. I've aligned it even in elevation, but it's automatically joining this one. So what I can do with this little blue dot here is right click and say disallow join. And once I do that and I hit escape, it disallows the join to this wall and it keeps it exactly where I want it to be. Generally, I want the walls to automatically join, and it figures them out pretty well, but every now and then you get that special case where you actually want that little offset. And you can actually see that little offset in our final deliverable. And I don't even have these dimensions right, so that's not even right. So this wall should be 11'4". For some reason that moved that as well, so I'm just going to, again, disallow join on this wall as well. And I'm going to pull that wall over to there, grab my curtain wall. So sometimes you just have to make these little adjustments. Again, for some reason, this curtain wall is even trying to join that. So again, I'm going to say disallow join, drag that over to that wall, and there we go. So I'm going to start my wall command back up, go to the midpoint center line of the wall. I didn't check my instance parameters because it always remembers the last thing that I did. So my curtain wall here, I'm going to stop it at that wall, hit escape, start back up again, skip over that fin wall, and go to there. As always, check my 3D view. So now I can see that I have large panes of glass wrapping all the way around to here. I'm going to do the same for the second floor. So I'm going to jump up to the second floor and draw that curtain wall in. Now I'm going to change this to 2'8", and the top offset to 12'8" coming from the second floor. So always check those offsets or those instance parameters. So this should be all correct now. I'm going to simply go around here. Now you can see that I have this same problem up here on the second floor. So this wall here, I can disallow join and drag it over to that point. Go back to my curtain wall, start at the center at the fin wall, come down here, again stop at this wall, start it back up. I hit escape and then it allows me to start back up, come over here. Now the curtain wall here is going to wrap around here. I'm not going to, again, I'm just going to get it in here. I'm not going to worry too much about its exact placement. I can worry about that later. So I just have a piece there. Go to my 3D view and you can see what's going on there. I'm going to have to change the bottom of this, but I'll get to that later. So now that I have my curtain wall in place, now I can start placing my grid. These punch windows, they just have a frame around the outside. These ribbon windows, these strip windows, these have multiple divisions on them. So I'm going to go to my north elevation, and before I can place my mullions, I have to create a grid system. Let's go to my final deliverable, take a look at my north elevation. So we're going to create these first floor vertical grids first. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 grid lines to break this up into 5 pieces. So I'm going to click the curtain grid, and as I hover, it only basically it'll find the curtain walls. So if you have no curtain walls, this button doesn't work. When you hover over the curtain wall, again, depending upon where you put your cursor, close to a horizontal or a vertical, you'll get a vertical or horizontal cut. So we want these to be vertical. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, which gives me 5 divisions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we can get these in place quickly because we want these to be equally divided. So what we are going to do is press the dimension button, and just like always, we're going to drive these with a dimension. Now the way that curtain wall works, I'm going to go to the face of the next curtain wall, and it snaps there. I'm going to go to each subsequent vertical grid, and then back over to this other face. I'm going to pull these down here, and after I set that dimension string, I'm going to click the equalize button, and now I have 4 equal spaces. However, I don't actually want these to be dimensioned on the elevations. I want them to be dimensioned in plan. But because this is now constrained using this very specific dimension, that's going to cause problems when I go to dimension it elsewhere. So even though I used this to set up equal dimensions, I'm now going to delete this dimension with the delete key, and when this Revit warning comes up, I am going to unconstrain them. It's not going to move them, but now they are free to move because I've unconstrained them. And again, that's important for a later step. So you have to be really careful when you constrain or lock dimensions like that because it can have effects later on. What I'm going to do here is now go back in and create more grid lines for the second floor. I don't know why I didn't create that one. And what I can do here is, again, I can align to the ones below, and every time I do that, I can lock them. I seem to keep having an issue here. Oh, you know what? I forgot to turn off my multiple align, so let's uncheck that. Get that aligned, lock it, align this one. I got them really close. So now if I move these second floor grids, the first floor will move with them, and vice versa. Now I want to create my horizontal mullions, so I'm going to count these. I have 1, 2, 3 in the upstairs, and 1, 2, 3, 4 in the first floor. So again, architecture, curtain grid, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Now these do get dimensioned in the elevation. We obviously can't dimension those heights in a plan view, so these we can drive straight from here. So we're going to go dimension all of these with a dimension string, bring it out, and then hit equal. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Hit equal, and now they're all ready to go. Now that we have the grids, now we can start placing our mullions. Our horizontal mullions are exactly the same type as these here. So we can go to mullion, 2x4.5 rectangle, and you can do grid line, and that'll select these. Now if you did all grid lines, it's going to put a 2.5 by, or sorry, a 2" by 4.5 on all of these, and the vertical members are going to be a different dimension. So we are just going to individually select the horizontals. Now don't forget, a lot of students do this, don't forget the top and bottom mullions as well. So we're going to simply click all those lines to get these mullions in place. Now for the vertical mullion, I'm going to go to the mullion tool, and what I want for that is I'm going to edit type, I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to call this one 4.5 by 4.5 so that it's square. So I'm going to rename it when I duplicate it. So 4.5 by 4.5 rectangular, hit OK. The thickness is 4.5, but again, because this is based on a center line, I got to go half of 4.5, which is 2.25 or 2.25 inches for both of these. And now I can click on the verticals to place all of these. Do not place them on the edges now. The edges are a very specific type of mullion called a corner mullion, because if you think about this in plan, this is where we have two corners of a piece of curtain wall coming together. So I'm going to go back to my north elevation, go back to my architecture tab, mullion, click on the type selector, and I'm going to select this L corner mullion. It's the wrong size, so I'm going to hit edit type. And again, this one I haven't used yet, so I'm just going to rename it. And I'm going to call it 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch corner. Oops. So they're going to be the same size as my verticals, but just because of the nature of the fact that it's a corner, to do these properly, you have to use this corner type. These are a little bit different though. They're going to have a leg 1 and a leg 2, and these are actually going to be 2.25 inches to get a true, just like our kind of like to the center line of our other mullion, it's the same thing, leg 1 and leg 2. Make sure that you also change the thickness to 4.5, otherwise you'll run into an error. Once we have all that set up, we can simply click on these corners now and place those mullions. And we can see what that looks like in the floor plan here. So again, we have a nice square mullion, even though it is technically a corner. And we've got our square mullions. We can see our curtain wall panel. If I change to consistent colors here, you can even see what that looks like here. This little section on the east elevation, I'm not going to show on screen. That's pretty much the same exact thing we just did, so you should be able to figure that out on your own. I'm going to switch to the west elevation, and again, I'm going to just, because I find it easier to see, I'm going to do consistent colors. Looks like this wall here is having that same issue. Let's see if we can fix that. So we're going to go to a roof plan, and same thing as before, we're going to disallow join, and that's going to allow us to pull that wall over where it belongs. Close that roof plan. Now what I can do is curtain grid. Let's do the horizontals first. 1, 2, 3, 4. For some reason it didn't make that first one. All right. Now these here, what we can do is we can go to a 3D view, and we can use that align tool and find that grid. You might have to move your cursor around. So that's the grid that's highlighted. Click on that, and then click on this one around the corner, and we can even align things around the corner and hit the lock icon again. So get that grid, get this grid, lock it. Because again, due to the nature of this design, we always want all of our mullions to line up. So we're gonna align these. It looks like it found them, it actually placed them aligned. Revit sort of anticipates some things that you're trying to do. Now we can go to our west elevation, check our final deliverable, and we've got 3 verticals here. So we can simply architecture grid, and place 2 verticals. Now again, just to get these in the right spot for now, I'm going to go from the face to these. Actually, before I do that, let's align these and lock them so that if I dimension 1, they should all go together. So we'll dimension these, but just like before, we're going to delete the dimension immediately afterwards and unconstrain them, because we are going to dimension these on the plan, and we don't want those dimensions, those constraints, to interfere with each other. So I'm going to hit the equals just to get them in the right spot, hit escape, select the dimension, delete, and say unconstrained. Same thing here. Do some curtain grids. I'm going to do some horizontals. And then start aligning them and locking them. Now, because these are locked to these and these are locked around the corner, so I move any of these and they all move together. Now, another trick I can do here is architecture mullion. I'm going to do, now these are going to be all 4x4, 4.5 by 4.5 rectangulars, the verticals. So I'm going to do these two verticals here and the end ones as well. Then I can come back, change this to my 2 by 4.5 and do all grid lines, and it'll do the remaining grid lines. So that's nice because I can do that, with one click instead of clicking all these buttons. So you can do the rest of these. On the west elevation, and I'm going to come back after those are done. Okay, so I've got that done on the west elevation where I've placed all of my mullions, I should say all my grids first, then all of my mullions. I do want again to point out that I have spaced these equally with a horizontal dimension, which then I've deleted and unconstrained this. So again, when I go back into the plan to actually place the dimensions that locate these, they will not be over constrained. The other thing that I've done, which I want to remind you, is that I've aligned all of the grid lines from this section of curtain wall to this section of curtain wall and locked them using the padlock icon. And I've done the same for the windows above to the windows below. So all of these things have parametric relationships to each other. I've also gone ahead and done all of that for the south elevation too, which is pretty much all the same stuff. And I've aligned these around the corner in a 3D view. So again, these are all aligned to the ones all the way back to the north side of the building. Now I wanted to point out this particular situation here on the south elevation. So this window here, or this piece of curtain wall, has two end units. So these mullions here are our typical 4.5 by 4.5 rectangular. However, if you look at this in 3D, this corner here wraps around to another piece of curtain wall. So this has to be a corner unit. So I'm going to go back to my south elevation. So I'm going to go in, go to my mullion, make sure I have 4.5 by 4.5 corners selected, and place that. Now you'll notice here that these do not line up because in my second floor plan, much like I always do, I just placed this curtain wall without worrying where it was located. What happens here is I want the mullions of my curtain wall to align, and currently they don't align. The best way to do this is with something called a reference plane. Now in lecture we talked about the three datum elements in Revit: levels, grids, and reference planes. So this is essentially just a guideline that we can do, and it's three-dimensional. It will show up in multiple views. So to create that, I'm going to click this reference plane button up in the work plane panel. You can also just type RP, and I'm going to grab the center line, or the midpoint I should say, of this mullion down here, and I'm going to draw that up above here. I'm just getting it in there for now. Now, because the center line of the mullion aligns with the center line of our curtain wall panel because of that edit that I did to the type where I made sure the panels are centered on all that, I can come up to my second floor plan and I can align, so AL, to this reference plane. You can see that this reference plane is not only vertical in that view, it goes all the way through our building. So we can find that reference plane in any other view. So I'm going to align to that the center of my curtain wall. And again, I might as well lock it because I do want that to always be centered. So going back down to my south elevation, I can see the result. Now I have that centered. And because again, I've aligned all of these to each other, I've locked all these to each other. And again, they maintain alignments. And that is so that, if this ever changes, everything's gonna, I can change one dimension and everything changes. And in fact, I don't think I've actually set that yet. I have not. So I have not actually located the edge of this wall yet because I did not put that dimension in. So I'm going to get out of the line, and I can go place a dimension from my fin wall to the edge of this wall. Now when I do this, again, you have to be really careful about what you're dimensioning to. When I hover over this, it gives me a dash line, and the prompt says curtain wall. I do not want to dimension the curtain wall. I want to dimension the brick wall. So I'm going to hit tab to cycle through, and I just hit it once and it comes up with the wall. So that's what I want, the brick wall. So click there, and I'm going to place this dimension, and it's supposed to be 29 feet. So now I can simply come in here, select this wall, change this to 29 feet, and that moves over. Now the one thing I noticed is I did not lock that reference plane to the center, so that's not in the right spot. So let's check our south elevation. Okay, so I kind of screwed that one up. I should have had that aligned to there. So because there's no center line to my mullion, what I can do is I can simply select this reference plane. So I had to tab in to select it. And what I can do is I can move it. So I can type MV or use the move button up here, choose that point and move it over to the midpoint. And because that curtain wall was locked to that reference plane, it moves this out. Now it would be much nicer and quicker if I could have simply aligned to the midpoint of this mullion, but that is not a spot that I can actually choose. So, but in the end, all of this moves and it is now correct. So now I'm going to keep moving around to my patio elevation because this has some intricacies that I want to show and point out. So let's open up that patio elevation, my east patio elevation, and I'm going to change temporarily my visual style so that I can see what's going on here. And when I place this curtain wall, I didn't change my settings, so it has the same bottom height as the curtain wall everywhere else, or the same bottom constraint and offset, I should say. So now I'm going to pull this down to the floor. Problem is that right now what's happening is the glass glazing, the curtain wall, is actually coming into this wall and overlapping. And I don't want that to happen, because if you look at the final deliverable, what's going to happen is we need this bottom mullion, or sorry, the second from bottom mullion, to be at the top of that, and then we're going to have another mullion in here so the glass has something to die into. To make that happen properly, what we have to do is we have to edit the shape of this curtain wall. And this is something you can actually do to any wall. So I'm going to select it, and I can come up to my contextual ribbon up here and hit edit profile. And this is just like editing the boundary of a floor or a roof or a ceiling or anything like that, where we're in this sketch mode, this edit profile mode, and the pink lines represent the edges of your profile. So what I can do is I can simply come in here, and I want it to align with these two lines. So I can use the pick lines tool, pick that line, and again, I like to lock things when I can. And now I can simply trim these, oops, this one here, to get that continuous boundary. I can hit the green check mark, and now that curtain wall jogs around that parapet wall. So I'm going to create my grid lines now, go to architecture, curtain grid. So I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, I'm going just because I like to get these to look even though they're probably going to change slightly when I dimension these in plan for my own visual benefit. I like to get these looking correct, so I'm going to equalize these. Okay, let's see. I need to move this one to there. Okay. And then again, now I can delete this, but I want to make sure I unconstrain it. Now these here wrap around. So what I can do here is go to a 3D view, and again, I can align these around the corner. So I'm going to grab that grid line, align it to that grid line, lock it. This one to there, lock it. This one to there, lock it. And then this one down here, it's actually going to be the bottom of the curtain wall. So it's going to be, you kind of got to move around to find it. There it is. So curtain wall, the bottom plane of the curtain wall is going to align with the plane of this one. Now you may get an error here saying can't create curtain wall mullion. So I'm going to delete that mullion. It didn't actually affect anything. Let me just double check. Yeah, so that's still there, 4.5 by 4.5 curtain mullion. Now I can go back to my east patio elevation. Now the problem is I can't dimension all of these because this last one ends up being taller than these others. So this technically isn't 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal ones. It's only 4 equal ones with an offset one or one of a different value. So I'm going to dimension these from here to here, so on and so forth. But I'm going to stop at that level, place my dimension, hit the equalize button. These are locked to something else. So if that something else was not equalized, I could possibly get an overconstrained error. But because those things have already been equalized and are actually aligned, I'm not getting that error. Now I can simply come in here and dimension to there and do my 2'8" dimension as is shown on the final deliverable. Now I can come in and I can place my mullions. So I'm going to go mullion, and I'm going to do my vertical mullions first. And these are all just rectangulars because I already have the corner one in all the way to the edge. And then I'm going to place my horizontal mullions, 2 by 4.5. Now I'm going to skip this one for now. I'm going to do this one. And then I'm going to come up here just to show you what's going to happen. And I can just do one single grid line. So I'm just going to do that just to show you what's happening here. So because on the south elevation, this is the bottom of the curtain wall, Revit is smart and knows that it can't center the mullion or else it would go into this wall. So it just offsets it up because it's the bottom. If it's a grid line, it will center it. So what's happening here is here the curtain wall keeps going down. So this is the center, but over here it's offset. So what we have to do here is create so that this thing can go over the top of this. We have to offset this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select that mullion. See if I can get it. Sometimes they're hard. You have to tab into them sometimes. And I'm going to edit type, and I'm going to duplicate, and I'm just going to simply call this unequal. And I'm going to change my width on either side of my grid line to be, the width on side 2 is going to be 2 inches, and the width on side 1 is going to be 0 inches. So I'm offsetting the entire width of this thing to one side of my grid line. Hit OK, and now that moves up there. Now you can see that it's still not going over to the edge there. So I'm going to delete this. So another thing I have to do is I have to do this vertical one here so I can come back. I'll do that first, place my vertical mullion. So there's that one. Now I can change back to the horizontal. So you'll notice when you get this in here that this mullion is going to go up too high. So you can select this mullion and you can hit the little plus button, and that changes the condition in how these mullions meet. Now you'll also notice this gap here, and that's simply because we haven't placed a mullion there yet. So we can go back to architecture because it sees this as a separate segment. Go to mullion, and we're going to do a 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangle, and we just do that there, and now everything looks great. So the next thing I'm going to do is start to create these doors in the curtain wall. I'm going to start with the north elevation, our main entrance to this building. So I'm going to come around here to this elevation here. So that's our north elevation. To do this here, I'm going to utilize that reference plane again. So this door is centered on this mullion, and this mullion is its location is set by dividing these all equally. Now again, we do not have these actually divided the proper way according to the plan, and that is why we're going to start setting this all up. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a reference plane, so RP, and I'm going to use that midpoint of this first mullion from the left to create that reference plane. I'm actually going to go in here. Reference planes are hard to select, so you're probably going to have to tab into them. I'm just going to pull this thing down here just so that it's easier to select and easier to see. So I want to place 2 more reference planes to determine where these new mullions go. So what we're going to do is create those reference planes, and we're going to offset them by a dimension. And that dimension is going to be, because again, our door is eventually going to be 6'2" from center of mullion to center of mullion. So we divide that by 2 and get 3 foot 1. Then we divide 4.5, the width of the mullion, by 2 and get 2.25, and add that to the 3 foot 1, and we get 3 foot 3.25. So again, we're dividing the 6 foot 2 and a mullion by 2. So we get 3 foot 1 and 2.25, and we add those together to get 3 foot 3.25. So I'm going to go to my elevation, and I'm going to create another reference plane. So we're going to draw 2 vertical reference planes. Okay, there we go. And then we can dimension these. And we can select this one, edit this to be, what did we say, 3 foot 3.25, 3 foot 3.25, and then select this one, say 3 foot 3.25. All right, so these are in relationship to this mullion, these are correct. Now, like I said, the actual location of these individual mullions might change when we put the dimensions down in the floor plan. So we have to remember that. What I need to do is get a new grid in here, because the grid is going to be centered on these reference planes. So I'm going to go to Architecture, Curtain Grid, and select those lines there. Now, what I'm going to do, if you look at the final deliverable, you'll see that there's no mullions up here where we just place those curtain grids. So what we can do is select that curtain grid, come up to our contextual ribbon, and we can add or remove segments. So we can click that, then we can just click on a segment. So a segment's basically wherever it meets another grid. So we have to click that twice, and you can see that that goes away. So now I can select this one and do the same thing. Now I can come in and I can place my mullions. So I'm going to do my vertical mullions. So those are 4.5 by 4.5, and I can place that mullion and this. I can also come in and I can select these mullions here, because essentially I want to get rid of everything inside of this door. And again, these mullions tend to be a little bit of a pain to select. You may have to tab into them if you want to get the individual mullions. Now you can see that I have more segments to delete, so I'm going to select that, remove this one, remove that one, select this grid line and remove these 2 segments. And now I can select this grid line and remove this segment. Now we can edit this profile, because what's going to happen is, just like we did before, the edge of the curtain wall has to come all the way out to the face of this mullion. And now that we have the mullions in, we know where everything is. So we can come in and we can select our curtain wall and edit the profile. And I'm going to pick lines, and I'm going to pick this side. So I had to tab to that side, and then I'm going to lock. Okay, so what I just did there, I over constrained, so I created a circular chain of references. So I can't lock that for now. That could cause some issues later. If I try to lock this, yep, see, I'm going to get the same thing. So I can't lock those for now. I'll leave those alone. I'm also going to find the floor. That one I should be able to lock, yeah. So now I can trim these up. So I want to trim that to that, this, trim this one to this. And now this here, first I can split it. So I can split that line. The split tool works on lines as well in sketches. And now I can trim this to this and this to this. Now I hit the green check mark. Now you may get this warning where it wants to delete some mullions. That's fine. That does happen. So now we need to, what's happening is the profile of the curtain wall is dipping down into my brick wall. So I need to cut this section of brick wall out. So I'm going to go to my first floor plan, and I'm going to use my split tool. So modify, split, and I'm going to just split this brick wall down here, just like I've done horizontally before, but this time I'm doing it vertically. Now I can do that, and now I can simply use my align tool to align to the back side of this mullion this brick wall. Now I'm going to try to lock that. That one worked that time. So same thing, do this, and then lock it. Back to my north elevation, and this is what I have. I need to fix a few things. These vertical supports should end at the bottom of this, and this should end at the top. So again, you just select an individual mullion. Now I didn't get the right thing. There we go. And you hit this little plus minus button or whatever icon that is, and it changes how these meet. These mullions are very finicky, so you're going to have to learn how to use the tab key to select them. Hover over this one and then hit the plus button. So now that looks all right. So the next thing we want to do is change the panel. So again, it's just this default glass panel. We want to change this panel into a door. So the first thing we have to do before we can do that is load the family for that. So we're going to go to Insert, Load Family, and this is a curtain wall panel now. I think it's listed under Doors. So here you go. There's Doors Curtain Wall. So this is a double. We don't want double storefront, we just want double glass, so we don't want a frame around this. And actually we want both this one and the single glass, because the single glass one we use on the patio elevation and on the west elevation. So we're going to load both of these now. So once those are loaded, now I can move my cursor over this door and I can tab to, so 2 tabs it took me, and now I'm selecting the panel. If you cannot select the panel when your cursor is on top of it, it's probably because your select elements by face is turned off. You want to make sure that this is always turned on. Now I have this panel here, and now I can simply click on the type selector and I can find my door curtain wall double glass. Click that, it swaps my default panel out for a door, and there we go. Now I have a door, and it just automatically assumes the size of the panel. So if I go to a 3D view now, so now we've got a door there. So for the west elevation, to get the door here, it's repeating those steps that I just did for the north elevation door. It's just instead of selecting a double panel, it's going to be a single panel. So if you look at the, so this is the east elevation. So there's a single door for the patio, which will also show up in the patio elevation. And then on the west elevation, there's a door here. So again, same steps. We have to add a mullion, and you can do all this. Again, you can place it and worry about the dimensions later once we go into plan, which we're going to do here in a second. And then add a mullion, remove certain line segments, add the door, and you should be able to do that since I showed you that earlier. The only thing left to do now is to dimension all of this stuff. So I'm going to go to my first floor plan. Much like everything else in this project, I'm going to start here at my entryway. I'm going to jump to my final deliverable to take a look at this. So you can see right now, this is my existing dimensions, this 24 foot 8. This 24 foot is already there. So it's these dimensions here that I'm looking at. So this first row, I'm going to dimension from the face of the wall to the face of the curtain wall mullion. Then I'm going to dimension from the face to the face of those mullions. And then I'm going to leave that out because I'm going to create a typical dimension over here. So basically all of these are going to be, 4 inches typical from the face of wall to the face of mullion. The next row is a set of equal dimensions that goes from the face of the curtain wall to the center lines. Now if you recall, in elevation we had equalized these to different dimensions. I think it was to the face of the glass, and I did that just to get it to look properly. But then we deleted those dimensions and unconstrained them because these dimensions here on the plan are actually going to drive the location of these things. And you can see that it's probably going to slightly change the placement of all these things because now we're equalizing them to the face of the mullion on the outsides and then to the center of the mullion to the insides. Inside of that, then between these two, so within that dimension string we have these dimensions. So within these two curtain wall panels we have a 6'2" center to center mullion opening, and the rest of that is equalized to either side. So jumping back into Revit, what I'm going to do here is I like to use the shortcut DI. You can also go to your quick access toolbar to access that command. Brings up the dimension command. Now you really need to pay attention to the highlight, the blue highlight. I want to dimension from the face of this wall to the mullion to the next mullion on the other side, the face of the mullion. I'm going to place that. It should snap to where these spacings are equal. So there's that dimension. Now I can come in here, I can grab my 4-inch dimension, pull that out with a leader, double click it, put in a piece of a text field below, which is parentheses, all caps, TYP parentheses for typical. So we don't have to dimension that in more than one spot. This one, if you look at the final deliverable, it's 24 foot, and it's calling out that it's face of storefront. So again, simple enough. Now that is not below, but that's after. So we're going to do, the suffix is face of storefront. So we've got those dimensions there. So again, dimension, come in here, make sure I'm going to the face of this. Now see, as I move my cursor around, it's finding a lot of different things to dimension. Make sure that you are highlighted on the particular element that you want to dimension to before you click. Now I'm going to go here, and when I hover over this, you see that I am actually dimensioning to the grid line of the curtain wall, which is what I want. I want to go to the grid line because that's the center line of that mullion, and I just keep going with one dimension. Again, these are all the same dimension for these dimension strings. Now here, I've got a bunch of things. I could dimension to my reference plane. I could dimension to this longer line, which is the center line of the door. But if I move my cursor down here, I'm trying to find the curtain grid. So if I tab, there we go. Now I have the curtain grid. So again, you have to be very sure that you're dimensioning to the correct thing. So now I'm going to grab the end of that, or the face of that curtain wall, place that dimension. Now I should be able to select this. It's hard to see, but click on the EQ and that equalizes everything. However, now you can see that the center line between these two panels is shifted from where I set it up with these reference planes. So I know that this door is not centered. So if I were to go to place these dimensions inside, this would not be equal to either side. I have to fix this. I'm going to go back to my north elevation, and I can see that here. All right, this reference plane is no longer on the middle of this mullion. So what I'm going to do is select all three reference planes and the dimensions that are driving them, the 3 foot, 3 and a quarter. And then I'm going to come up here, and I'm not going to align. I'm going to move all those things. So I'm going to type MV, and I'm going to grab this point right here, this intersection, and I'm going to move that over until it finds the endpoint of that grid line, or whatever that endpoint was. So now I've moved my reference planes. Now I didn't have anything locked to them, so I still have to manually reconfigure this, but that's not a big deal. I can grab, let's see if I can do this. I can align to the reference plane center line of that mullion. Now you might get this warning saying, hey, I'm going to delete some things. It didn't actually delete it. It just, that one's actually a little wonky right there, but we'll fix that later. Now we're going to go align to there, the center line of that. And you can see that the center line then, after I do those sides, everything's nice and aligned again. I've got a few issues here. I've moved this over and the wall hasn't moved with it. This piece here can be deleted, but you see this issue here. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to delete this mullion here, and we're going to select the curtain wall panel, or sorry, the curtain wall I should say. Somehow I got the panel there. I want the entire curtain wall, edit the profile again, and again now I'm going to align to that edge here and to that edge here. So that's going to get my curtain wall in the right place. Hit escape to get out of the align tool, and then hit the green check mark. Now again, I'm going to get some warnings. I'm going to ignore them. This one's here, so now I can come in here. I can do a mullion, and I'm going to do a 2" by 4.5" down here, and that's fixed that little issue there. Now the only thing I have to change now is the brick wall, so you can see that overlaps my mullion on this side and it's missing the mullion on that side. So I can go back to my floor plan and I can align to the mullion the end of the wall, and I'm going to do that to the other side as well. Now I'm realizing that I don't have enough room here, so that tends to happen quite often when you're doing dimensions, that you simply don't have the room to place them. So now I'm going, and now you can see the power of having these all as one dimension string, because now I can pull this out further, and I'm not moving 3 dimensions, I'm moving 1. So I'll move this one out. This one should be in line with that. Pull my equals out, and this might be too far, we'll see, because the other thing to keep in mind is I have to make sure that this fits on my sheet as well. So now that I have that all set up, now I can go back in again with the dimension command, come from the center line here to the center line of that mullion. Now I can't do this as one dimension because I want to equalize this dimension and the dimension over here while also having a dimension that's different in between. I can't do that. They must all be equal. So I'm going to place this dimension, then I'm going to do this one, and you can see that one's 1 foot 6 and 11/32. This is 1'6" and 11/32. So all I'm going to do, I don't like to do this too often, but because again these are actually separate dimensions, I'm going to replace with the text EQ, all caps. Double click, replace with text EQ, all caps. I don't know what's going on with this dimension. Why it's giving me a Z. Oh, I see. I accidentally clicked this twice. There we go. I had, if you click, now see, that's another thing why you have to pay attention. I wasn't paying attention, and I dimensioned probably from this grid line to this reference plane, which is a 0 dimension, which is silly, right? I would never want to place a 0 dimension, but because I grabbed two things that were in the same plane, you can actually create that dimension. If you followed this video tutorial, you'll notice that this is going to say 6'6.5", and the final deliverable is 6'2". That is a screw up that I did. I messed up my math. I had been looking at this as if these were dimensioned to the face of the mullion, not to the center line. If you complete this assignment for your final and you have 6'6.5", I'm not going to take any points off for that because that was my screw up in the video, and if you follow the video, that'll be incorrect from the final deliverable. So don't worry about that. So the rest of these dimensions, let me go back to the final deliverable, are pretty much the same as I've shown here. Pretty straightforward, just creating more dimensions and overriding them with, not overriding them, but adding some prefixes and or suffixes and some typicals here and there. So I'm not going to go over all of these dimensions, but again, just make sure that anything shown in the final deliverable is shown on your drawing. Thanks for watching.